Welcome to the Cornell Prodairy webinar series. Our presenter today is Dr. Frank Welcome, who's a veterinarian with Quality Milk Production Services, which is a department of Cornell University's College of Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Welcome will be talking about milk quality for this webinar.
Okay, great. Milk quality is measured by different organizations in different manners. Most of us are accustomed to the regulatory standards. These are minimum standards for interstate shipment of milk. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with those standards. The bulk tank somatic cell count is the one that most people are aware of. And that is set by the pasteurized milk ordinance at 750,000 cells. There is the issue of bacteria counts, often referred to as the standard plate count or PLC. That's set at 100,000 CFU. The regulatory agencies that are responsible for monitoring milk quality also are responsible for testing for residues, freezing point of milk, which is added water, and they also look at critical components like protein and fat. Next slide, Kathy. Now, there are also processor standards, and those are typically, particularly right now, higher than the regulatory standards. Back in 2012, the European Union imposed their standards on any dairy products shipped to the EU. So many of the milk processors have adopted those standards. It is essentially the minimum standards, and that is set at 400,000 cells. Excuse me. The standard plate count remains at 100,000 cells. And of course, most processors consider high quality milk to have a bacteria count or an SPC of 10,000 CFU or less, and that's considered excellent. Next slide, Kathy. Now, retailers have also introduced new standards or consumer standards, and these are issues that are concerned by consumers in general. And today's consumer is seeking dairy products that are very high quality, and they're referring primarily to a long shelf life, good taste, and things of that sort. They want a product that is safe for consumption. They've been concerned about the use of antibiotics in dairy cattle, and they certainly want a product that is wholesome and nutritious. And that's because most of our at least our fluid milk is consumed by children. Next slide, Kathy. Okay. In addition to those issues, recently, over the last 2 to 5 years, issues like animal care or welfare and environmental stewardship have become very important issues to consumers, and that is reflected in the demands that retailers are making of producers and processors for the milk that they buy. And this includes issues, again, such as antimicrobial use on dairy farms, not necessarily related to a residue issue, but definitely concerned with the overall use of drugs, particularly antibiotics, on the farm. Yeah, next slide, Kathy. Okay, so why produce quality milk? There are certainly a variety of issues that are important to producers. Number one is pride in their product. You know, in the last couple of years, many of our herds have done extremely well in producing high quality dairy products. They want to produce milk that is as high a quality as possible, and we're talking about herds that are seeing cell counts well below the 200,000 mark that we used to consider an indication of very high quality product. High quality products, so that is low cell counts and low bacteria counts, can add value and income to dairy farmers. Animal health and welfare concerns are important, primarily because animals that are healthy, that is, have a low prevalence of mastitis in their herds, are going to produce more milk, and there's going to be more saleable milk produced by healthy cows. Lastly, are the regulatory issues. Regulatory issues are not a major problem for most of the dairy herds in New York State or in this country, but occasionally they are. The farmers have to realize that these regulatory standards are not a target, they're actually an upper allowable limit. For the dairy industry, here I'm talking specifically about processors, co-ops, and to some degree retailers. They're concerned with consumer and market demands. Some also have an issue with pride in their products. So their quality of product is important to many of the processors too. So Kathy, next slide. Okay, this is some quotes that I took from a recent issue of Milk Magazine. It's published by Farm Journal. And they were concerned with processors' demand for quality milk, but because of current market circumstances, fewer and fewer processors are not willing to pay for improved quality. So we're seeing quality incentives disappear or certainly being decreased. And these are some quotes from one of the dairymen. This happens to be from somebody in Wisconsin, but I think they're still quite valid and very common even among dairy farmers in New York State. But it's always in a dairyman's best interest to have the healthiest herd you can. For reasons that we all already presented, healthy cows means more milk, better milk. And we're going to see farmers continue to produce high quality milk regardless of the presence or absence of premiums. but which is, of course, what processes are counting on. But one of the important quotes was that producers who don't meet milk quality standards will be looking for a new home for their milk. We've had phone calls here at the Quality Milk Production Services program from some of larger farms that are not able to meet high quality standards. They're not in violation of quality standards. It's just that their milk doesn't meet the standards being set by some of their retailers. And I've had calls from several very large producers that are on the brink of losing their markets because their cell counts, or lesser so, their bacteria counts are not meeting the standards demanded by their producers. So next slide, Kathy. Okay. Just to show you that this can be done, I recently at the National Mastitis Council meeting, the National Dairy Quality Awards were given to 6 farms across the country. 2 of those farms are New York dairies, and I've got a photograph here that shows the Davenports from Tollgate Holsteins. They're down in the Hudson Valley. And this farm has won the National Dairy Quality Award program 6 years. So they have been doing a phenomenal job. Tollgate Holsteins has they're an Agrimark herd. They've won top quality milk honors from Agrimark since 1988. Their bulk tank somatic cell count this year, for the year, averaged 41,900 cells. Their typical bacteria count or raw count is 1,000 or less. And Jim attributes his success to meticulous milking hygiene. Next slide, Kathy. This is the other herd that won the award in New York this year. This is Foltz Farm in Western New York. Again, incredibly excellent quality milk, 50,000 bulk tank somatic cell count for the year. This farm is a robotic farm, and they attribute their success to time in the barn that leads to high milk quality. If you're interested in finding out more about how these farms, as well as the other award winners, it was written up as a feature article in the January issue of Horde. So you can see how they manage milk quality on their farm. Next. Okay, so how do they do it? Probably, as both of these award winners mentioned, it's attention to detail. They establish goals. These include not only bulk tank somatic cell count goals, but they're looking at other issues that influence the udder health of their animals, and they're looking at key performance indicators such as infection rates, hygiene scores of the cows, things of that sort. They have a plan. They keep accurate records, not only of treatment records, particularly for mastitis, but they have performance records. These farms are all on test, so they know which cows are problems. They're able to identify emerging issues on the farm fairly quickly, and they react to them appropriate. They use appropriate tools and technologies such as monthly cell counts. They're willing to use some actually rather simple tools like California mastitis test and so on. And probably the most important issue is that everybody on the farm that has responsible for milk quality understands their plan, and they recognize when particular issues are out of order. That is, when cell counts are starting to increase or infection rates are starting to increase. Next, Kathy. So again, how do they do it? Um, Probably one of the most important things is facilities in cow hygiene. These are photographs of two different types or management types present. The photograph on the left is actually of the freestall barn, the teaching dairy here at Cornell. You can see how clean these cows are. The floors have quite an absence of manure, and the cows are laying down. They're very comfortable, and they're on clean bedded sand. The photograph on the right is a tie stall barn. This happens to be a farm that runs a bulk tank somatic cell count less than 100,000. Um, Again, you can see that the cows are very clean, comfortable. I'd like to see more bedding under the cows, but these are clean, dry, and comfortably housed cows. Next slide, Kathy. Next again. Okay, we've got a couple of photographs here of facilities on farms that have issues, housing issues that are contributing to high cell count. The photograph on the left is actually showing a dry cow pen. Um, Excellent looking cows, except that this dry pen is overcrowded. It's extremely difficult, even though this pen is bedded every day, to keep those cows clean and dry. And you can see that cow that's standing next to the one that's lying down. You can see manure stains on both her udder and her flanks. The photograph on the left, or I'm sorry, on the right, these are beautiful looking heifers, but they're housed in a mud hole. And this farmer actually was concerned about why and how his heifers were freshening with coliform mastitis, which is actually fairly rare in first lactation animals. The solution to this problem was actually quite simple. We chased the heifers back into the barn, the freestall barn, closed the gate, and within days the problem was solved. One more slide, Kathy. So, when we see fresh cows that look like this, you know that you're not going to be very successful in producing high quality milk. Many cows that freshen looking like this already have existing infections, even heifers, um, that essentially is the result of really poor hygiene and housing issues. Next slide, Kathy. Okay, some illustrations of what we don't like to see. Again, the photograph on the left is a freestall barn. Um, the manure is removed from these alleyways only once a day, and the photographs of these udders on the right are from cows in this herd. So no matter how hard you try, you can get these teats so that they look pretty clean. However, because they were so dirty, the bacteria population on that teat skin is going to be much higher had those teats been uh, more appropriately free of debris and manure on those teats. Uh, the other thing concerning these photographs is that when these cows go through the parlor, it's going to take a lot longer to properly clean and sanitize those teeth before milking. Next slide, Kathy. One of the things that dairymen can do, particularly if they're concerned about the hygiene of cows' udders and teats, is to actually go through, use a form like this to score the herd. Find out just how clean or dirty the udders on their cows are. Um, the blue command at the top of this page, you can, will give you access to this form. You can download it and print it. It's from the University of Wisconsin, but this is the form that we use at Quality Milk to assess cow hygiene. And assessing cow hygiene is something that we do every time we visit a herd. Next slide, Kathy. Um, could you go back for just a second, Kathy? This when you do evaluate cow hygiene, it's always good to do that initially to set a baseline level, but you can after you've made appropriate changes in housing or bedding management, yeah, you can follow up to actually demonstrate that the actions that you took to provide cleaner cows is actually doing just that. So what we like to see is actually a 10% or less of the cows scoring in the score 3 or 4 category. At a 10% level, we feel that you can significantly reduce the infection risk of those cows. We want to see cows that have udders that look like those in score 1 and score 2. Okay, next slide, Kathy. Now the other next important issue is cow comfort. Most people don't think of that or as an issue, but again, you know, we've got a photographs here of a freestall barn. Both came from the same farm. These are sand-bedded freestalls. I have no idea how long ago the new bedding had been put in there, but this bedding material was not good quality sand for bedding. It's actually more like concrete than it doesn't provide a good cushion surface for the cows. And as you can see from the photograph on the right, that how dirty the cows are, the very low level of the surface of the stall, which actually accumulates a lot of urine and manure and just makes a very unhealthy, unsanitary surface for the cows to lie on. Next, Kathy. Okay, milking procedures again is equally important, as facilities cleanliness. Uh, you need to have a consistent routine with proper milking procedures. Wearing gloves is particularly important. Um, we want farmers to use single-use towels to clean and dry teats and teat ends. What we really truly want to see is clean, dry, well-stimulated teats so that cows, when being milked, milk flow will be at a fairly high rate. And lastly, we want all milkers on the farm to have a positive attitude and be well trained in the milking procedures that are to be put in use on that farm. Next slide, Kathy. Okay. And the reason for training is really quite well depicted in this photograph. A cow with a dirty udder. Um, Teat dip in this situation is applied with a sprayer rather than a dip cup. And you can see that one of these teats doesn't have any teat dip on it whatsoever. The right hind teat has a little bit of dip on it, but if we were able to look at the front surface of the teat, they'd be totally devoid of any teat dip. Next. So, good milking key points are we want to see teats that are well covered with teat dip. The teat dip should be on those teats for 30 seconds prior to wiping the teat dip or wiping the teats clean and dry. We want to see a 1 to 2 minute prep lag period between the wiping or stimulation of letdown and the attachment of the milking unit. Next slide, Kathy. Like, another issue that you can do um, periodically just to assess your ability to properly and adequately clean teeth is to swab teat ends. You can take a towel, a clean towel, or a 4x4 gauze pad and specifically wipe the teat end between your thumb and index finger and see what kind of debris remains on the teats after the cows are being prepped for milking. Again, we want to see fewer than 10% of the teats, and actually we would prefer to see no teats or teat ends with any bedding or manure debris on the teat end. When you look at many of these cows, they will have clean teats when looked at from the side or the end. But if you look specifically at the teat end, you're going to find a lot of the animals still have a lot of manure left on the teat end. And this is something that you can do on periodically as a matter of routine to assess teat end hygiene. Next slide, Kathy. So these are two towels from a herd that we evaluated here, where the teats actually look quite clean after preparation for milking, but when we swab the teat ends, you can see the amount of manure and bedding debris that's still left on those teat ends. Next, Kathy. Milking equipment, again, one of the four major contributors to high risk for infection. Um, Milking systems should be evaluated certainly at least once a year on smaller farms. Um, Twice a year for is what we would recommend for most herds. And on larger farms, that is farms milking more than 500 cows, we would prefer to have the milking system evaluated 3 to 4 times a year. Um, Farmers need to be aware of the need for routine maintenance, replacing rubber parts, gaskets, milk hoses, liners, and so on. Checking average claw vacuum fairly frequently um, is very important. Milking time maintenance, removing soil from the units, and that's chiefly manure, uh, and to ensure that air vents that are either on the claw or the inflations, liners, are not obstructed. Next slide, Kathy. Okay, so photographs of again a herd that was having significant problems with high infection rates, especially subclinical mastitis in their herds. And these are the units that they were milking with. Um, they really didn't bother to maintain or clean the exterior part of the milking units, and this should be done on a regular basis during milking. In most cases, it's best done when group changes occur and you have a little more time to properly clean the exterior of these units. Next slide, Kathy. Okay, this is a photograph that I took a number of years ago at a fairly large farm. Um, and you can see fresh manure on the end of that teacup. And that occurred a lot more often than I would certainly feel comfortable with. The worst thing about this situation was that as as soon as I finished taking that photograph, that unit was put on another cow without ever being cleaned up. So you can just imagine what that would do to both milk quality and the risk for infecting that cow with environmental mastitis. If you look closely inside that inflation, you can see some debris inside the liner. Next slide, Kathy. So, again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, uh, whenever the units become soiled or between groups, we like to see the units hosed off so that they're nice and clean. If there's any water remaining on the mouthpiece of the unit, when the new group of cows comes in, a milker can take a clean towel and wipe that water residue off the mouthpiece of the liner, again reducing any exposure to environmental organisms. One thing you might notice about this photograph is that there are no cows in the parlor when this hosing takes place, so that we're not contaminating freshly milked cows' teats with an aerosol mixture of water and manure. Next slide, Kathy. um, I'm sure you're all aware of the National Milk Producers Federation Farm Program, which addresses the issues of animal welfare, environmental stewardship, and prudent antimicrobial use. Um, all of the major co-ops in New York State and across the country are now requiring their producers to enroll in this program. Uh, and this program is constantly being updated, and compliance with their recommendations is going to be have to demonstrated by producers, and again, non-compliance is putting your access to milk markets at risk. Next slide, Kenny. Therapy, and this has to do primarily with the use of antibiotics and antimicrobials on dairy animals. You know, milk residues, the milk residue issue has largely been resolved. We see very, very few positive truckloads of milk um, with antibiotic residues. The most recent information available shows that there's 0.014% positive truckloads, um, which is excellent. However, consumers are still aware of that issue, and even though none of that milk gets on the market, they're concerned about exposure of their children and themselves to antimicrobials. And this is largely because of all of the activity concerning antimicrobial resistance that's become a global issue. So, some of the solutions that farmers can consider to reduce the risk of residues and reduce overall use of antibiotics on their farms is to consider pathogen-based therapy for mastitis cases. This allows you to identify the bug that is responsible for a specific clinical infection in cows. Not all bacteria are sensitive to antibiotics. Actually, we have shown, and as others have shown in other universities, that we grossly overuse antibiotics for clinical mastitis treatment. And anywhere from 40 to 60% of the cases are really not appropriately treated with antibiotics. Another thing that's growing um, in popularity is selective dry cow therapy. Um, the other is the use of internal teat sealants. There are many companies now coming out with internal teat sealants to prevent or to minimize the risk for new infections during the dry period. I honestly recommend that you consider all of these practices on your farms, but I also recommend that you need to discuss these options with your veterinarian just to make sure that they're appropriate for your farm. Next, Kathy.
So Frank, we need to finish up in the next minute or so.
Yeah, okay. Why don't you go to the next slide? Okay, records again are really are very important. In New York State, you're actually required to keep records for 3 years. Um, this is going to reduce the chance of error. And if you ever do have an issue with a milk residue or a animal at slaughter that is identified with a residue, these records should be able to provide you with some proof of compliance with antimicrobial use. Next. And that's it.
All right. Frank, thank you very, very much, folks. If you have questions for Dr. Welcome, I think maybe you should go ahead and contact me directly. Oh, nope. I was hoping your email would be here. Frank, would you just quickly share your email with us?
Yep, my email is flw2 at cornell.edu.
So,
And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Frank. Excellent presentation, and thanks to all of you for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Okay, thank you.